There is a moment after someone leaves when the world around you looks exactly the same. Yet somehow everything feels different. You sit in a familiar room, surrounded by the same walls, the same objects, the same quiet corners. But something has changed. A place that once felt warm now carries a strange emptiness. A chair remains untouched. A conversation that used to happen naturally no longer comes. A message you once waited for without thinking about it now becomes a silence you notice every day. The hardest part of losing someone is not only the absence of the person, it is the empty space their presence created inside your life. Because when someone becomes deeply connected to us, they do not only become part of our memories, they become part of our routines, our expectations, our sense of who we are. We begin building small parts of our identity around them without even realizing it. The mind quietly says, "This person will always be here. This moment will continue. This feeling will remain." And when life moves in a different direction, something inside us struggles to accept what has already happened. We do not only miss the person, we miss the version of ourselves that existed when they were still beside us. This is why loss can feel so overwhelming. It is not simply the ending of a relationship, a friendship, or a chapter of life. It feels like something has been taken away from the foundation we were standing on. But ancient Taoist wisdom points toward a different way of seeing change. It suggests that suffering often does not come from change itself. It comes from our attempt to stop what was never meant to remain still. The river does not suffer because the water moves. The tree does not fight because its leaves fall. Nature does not hold on to one season forever because it understands something humans often forget. Everything that exists is part of a continuous movement, yet the human mind tries to create safety by holding things in place. We hold on to people, we hold on to memories, we hold on to moments. And the tighter we hold, the greater our fear becomes. Because anything we believe we must possess becomes something we are terrified of losing. Taoism does not teach us to stop loving. It does not ask us to become cold or disconnected. Instead, it invites us to understand love without turning it into ownership, to appreciate what arrives, to honor what stays, and to accept what changes. Because sometimes what leaves our life does not only create an empty space. Sometimes that empty space reveals something that was hidden beneath everything we were holding on to. A quiet part of ourselves that existed before the attachment. A strength we never had the chance to discover. A freedom we never knew was waiting. Perhaps the deepest pain of losing someone is not that they are gone. Perhaps it is that their absence forces us to meet ourselves without the things we depended on for comfort. And maybe that is where the real journey begins. Because before we can understand why change hurts so deeply, we must first understand why the human heart tries so desperately to hold on to what was never truly ours to keep. After someone leaves, the mind often returns to one painful thought. If only things had stayed the same. If only that moment could have lasted longer. If only life had listened to our wishes. But hidden beneath that thought is something deeper, something we rarely notice while we are caught inside the pain. Perhaps the greatest suffering was not created by the ending itself. Perhaps it was created by the part of us that refused to accept the ending, because the human heart has a quiet habit. When something brings us comfort, we begin to believe comfort means permanence. A person makes us feel understood, and slowly we begin to depend on their presence. A certain chapter of life feels peaceful, and we begin to imagine it will continue forever. A version of ourselves feels complete, and we become afraid of anything that might change it. Without realizing it, we begin building walls around things that were never meant to stand still. This is where attachment begins. Attachment is subtle. It does not always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like love. Sometimes it feels like loyalty. Sometimes it appears as the desire to protect something precious. But beneath it, there is often a hidden request. Do not change. Do not leave. Do not become different from the version I have learned to love. And when life refuses that request, the mind feels betrayed. But life was never making a promise to remain unchanged. The river does not apologize for moving forward. The clouds do not hold their shape because we find them beautiful. The seasons do not remain because we wish one particular day could last forever. Everything in existence moves. The Tao teaches that peace comes not from controlling the movement of life, but from learning how to move with it. A person standing in the middle of a flowing river does not stop the water by fighting against it. The struggle only creates exhaustion. The river continues either way. Yet human beings often spend years fighting the same current. We fight the past because we want it back. We fight the present because it is not what we expected. We fight the future because we cannot guarantee what it will bring. And in that struggle, we lose the only moment we truly have. This does not mean love should become distant. It does not mean we should care less. A flower is not loved less because we understand that one day its petals will fall. In fact, knowing something is temporary can make our appreciation deeper. Attachment says, I need this to remain because I cannot be whole without it. Love says, I am grateful that this was part of my journey. The difference is quiet, but it changes everything. One creates fear. The other creates freedom. Because when we stop trying to possess what life only allows us to experience, something inside us begins to soften. And that softness reveals a question we often avoid. If the things we hold on to are constantly changing, then what part of us remains when everything outside of us begins to disappear? When someone leaves, there is a strange silence that follows, not only in the room around you, but inside you. The routines that once filled your days suddenly disappear. The conversations you expected to have no longer happen. The small habits built around another person slowly fade away. And in that quiet space, a difficult question begins to appear. Who am I now? For many people, this question feels frightening, because we rarely notice how much of ourselves is shaped by the people around us. We become someone's companion, someone's closest friend, someone's source of comfort, someone's person to call when life becomes heavy. These roles become so familiar that we mistake them for our identity. We forget that they are only parts of us. A person can spend years becoming what someone else needs. They adjust their words, their dreams, their habits, even their personality, often without realizing it. Not because they are weak, but because human beings naturally seek connection. We want to belong. We want to be chosen. We want to feel that our presence matters. But sometimes, while trying so hard to remain important in someone else's world, we quietly move away from our own. We silence certain parts of ourselves because they do not fit. We ignore old dreams because there is no space for them anymore. We become so focused on preserving a connection that we forget the person who existed before that connection began. Then one day, the relationship changes. The person leaves. And suddenly, all the identities built around them begin to fall away. At first, this feels like emptiness, like something has been taken. But what if something else is happening? What if the silence is not only showing you what is missing? What if it is revealing what has been hidden? Taoist wisdom speaks about returning to what is natural, not creating a new self, not constantly improving, proving, or rebuilding who you are. Returning. Because beneath all the roles, expectations, and stories you have collected, there is a part of you that does not disappear when someone walks away. A quiet presence that existed before anyone knew your name, before anyone praised you, before anyone needed you. Imagine a lake covered by fallen leaves. From the surface it looks disturbed and unclear, but beneath those leaves the water is still there. The depth never vanished. It was only hidden. Human beings are often like that. Life places layers upon us. Relationships, responsibilities, fears, and expectations slowly cover the person underneath. Sometimes loss removes those layers in a painful way, but what remains is not nothing. What remains is you. The loneliness that once felt like an empty room can become a place where you finally hear your own thoughts again. The silence that once felt like abandonment can become the space where forgotten parts of yourself return. And perhaps the greatest discovery after losing someone is not finding a way to replace their presence. Perhaps it is discovering the presence that was there before they arrived. There is a strange moment that arrives after someone leaves your life. At first it feels like something has been taken away. A voice that used to be there becomes silent. A routine disappears. A space that once felt full suddenly feels unfamiliar. The human mind naturally sees this emptiness as a problem. We rush to cover it. We fill the silence with distractions. We search for another person to replace what was lost. We look for anything that can return the feeling of completeness we once had. But what if the emptiness is not a wound? What if it is an opening? This is one of the quiet lessons hidden within Taoist wisdom. The things we often overlook are sometimes the very things that give life its meaning. A cup is valuable not because of the clay that surrounds it, but because of the empty space inside. A room becomes useful not because of its walls, but because of the space those walls create. Without emptiness, nothing could enter. Without space, nothing could exist. Yet when a person experiences loss, they rarely see emptiness this way. They see only absence. They see only what is missing. They forget that the space left behind may also be the place where something new begins to grow. For years, many people build their identity around what they hold on to: a relationship, a role, a person who needs them, a familiar presence that gives their days structure. Then one day, that presence disappears, and suddenly, they are forced to sit with a question they avoided for years. Who am I when there is nothing left to hold on to? This question can feel uncomfortable because silence reveals what noise was hiding. When life is constantly filled with expectations, conversations, and responsibilities, there is little room to notice the deeper parts of ourselves. But when the noise fades, something begins to return. Not a new version of you, a forgotten one. The Tao does not teach us to fight every empty space. A river does not force its way through the land. It moves around what blocks it, trusting the path that appears. Human beings often suffer because they believe every empty moment must be immediately repaired. Every loss must be replaced. Every silence must be broken. But nature does not hurry to fill every space. A winter field looks empty, yet beneath the surface, life is quietly preparing. A tree loses its leaves, but it is not failing. It is returning to a necessary stillness. Perhaps your emptiness carries the same hidden purpose. Perhaps the absence you fear is creating room for awareness, clarity, and freedom. The person who left may have taken their place in your life, but they did not take your ability to exist fully. They did not take your inner quiet. They did not take the part of you that existed before anyone arrived. And when you stop running from the empty space, you may discover something unexpected. The emptiness was never asking to be filled. It was waiting to be understood. For many people, the hardest part of losing someone is not the moment they leave. It is everything that happens afterward. The mind returns to the same memories. It searches through old conversations, old moments, old possibilities. It quietly asks what could have been different, what could have been said, what could have been changed, and without realizing it, a person can spend years trying to walk backward into a place that no longer exists. The strange thing about attachment is that it often disguises itself as love. We believe we are holding on to someone because they mattered, and they did matter. Their presence shaped us. Their kindness, their words, their place in our lives, all of it became part of our story. But sometimes what we are holding on to is not the person. It is the version of life that existed when they were still there. This is where Taoist wisdom reveals something subtle. Life is not painful only because things change. Life becomes painful when the mind demands that changing things remain unchanged. A river does not suffer because the water moves. It continues because it moves. If the river tried to hold on to every drop that passed through it, it would no longer be a river. It would become still water with no life flowing through it. Human beings often do the same thing. We try to freeze moments. We try to preserve relationships exactly as they were. We try to hold on to seasons that have already completed their purpose. But nature never moves that way. The tree does not fight when its leaves fall. The sky does not become angry when the sun disappears. The ocean does not chase the waves after they reach the shore. Everything moves. Everything changes. And somehow, everything continues. This does not mean that acceptance is easy. It does not mean pain disappears the moment we understand impermanence. Taoism does not ask us to become cold or emotionless. It does not ask us to stop caring. It asks us to stop fighting reality. There is a difference between feeling sadness and becoming trapped inside it. There's a difference between remembering someone and trying to bring back a moment that has already passed. There is a difference between love and attachment. Love allows something to exist as it is. Attachment tries to force it to remain as we want it to be. The Tao teaches the power of effortless action, not laziness, not surrendering your life, but moving in harmony with what is already happening instead of exhausting yourself fighting against the current. A person who learns this discovers a quiet strength. They no longer need to control every ending. They no longer need another person's presence to feel whole. They begin to understand that peace cannot be placed in someone else's hands, because anything placed outside of ourselves can eventually disappear. The deepest freedom arrives when we stop asking life to return what it has taken and begin noticing what the empty space has made possible. Because sometimes what leaves our life does not only create absence, sometimes it creates room. Room for awareness, room for growth, room for a version of ourselves that could never appear while we were desperately holding on to what was already changing. And when a person reaches that place, they discover something far greater than the ability to let go. They discover that they were never meant to lose themselves when someone else walked away. The greatest freedom a person can discover is not the freedom to walk away from everyone. It is the freedom to remain whole, even when someone else does. For much of life, we are taught to search for ourselves through others. We look for identity in relationships, approval in attention, and security in the presence of people we love. And when those things disappear, it can feel as if a part of us disappeared with them. But perhaps the pain reveals something we were never meant to ignore. Perhaps what we lost was not ourselves. Perhaps we only lost the illusion that someone else could complete us. Taoist wisdom does not ask a person to become distant from the world. It does not celebrate loneliness or encourage the rejection of human connection. The Tao flows through everything, through friendship, through love, through family, through every meaningful bond we create. The lesson is not to stop loving people. The lesson is to stop placing the foundation of your entire existence on something that can change. A tree does not refuse the wind because the wind may leave. It does not hold on to every bird that rests on its branches. It simply stands rooted, allowing life to come and go. There is a quiet strength in becoming like that. When you no longer need another person to define your worth, your relationships begin to change. You stop holding people with fear. You stop loving from a place of emptiness. You begin to love from fullness. You no longer say, "Stay because I cannot survive without you." You begin to say, "I am grateful that you are here, but I remain complete even when life changes." This is a different kind of love. A love without possession, a connection without chains, a closeness without fear. Many people spend their lives trying to avoid losing others, but they never ask what they are losing inside themselves while trying so hard to hold on. They abandon their own peace. They silence their own needs. They forget their own direction. Then one day, when someone leaves, they are forced to meet the person they have been neglecting all along, themselves. And that meeting can be painful, but it can also be the beginning of something honest. Because the person who returns to themselves discovers a truth that was always there. Nothing outside of you can give you something that was never yours to begin with. Peace was never owned by another person. Strength was never created by someone staying. Your ability to continue was never given to you by someone else's presence. It was always within you. Loss can change the shape of your life. It can create silence where there was once noise. It can create distance where there was once closeness. But if you allow it, that same emptiness can reveal something deeper. A person who belongs completely to themselves does not become alone. They become free. And from that freedom, they can finally meet the world not with desperation, but with an open heart. There is a moment after every loss when the world feels strangely unfamiliar. The room is the same. The walls are the same. The morning light enters through the same window. Yet something feels different because someone who once filled that space is no longer there. For a while, the mind returns again and again to what has changed. It searches through memories. It revisits old conversations. It imagines different endings. It quietly asks how something that felt permanent could disappear so suddenly. But with time, another understanding begins to appear. The empty space was never only a reminder of what was gone. It was also a place where something new could begin. This is the part of loss that we rarely see in the beginning. We notice the absence, but we do not notice the awareness that grows around it. We notice what left, but we do not notice what was awakened inside us. Taoist wisdom reminds us that life is not a collection of things meant to remain unchanged. It is a constant movement. Like water flowing through a river, every moment arrives, shapes us, and continues onward. The river does not suffer because the water from yesterday is gone. It continues because it accepts that movement is its nature. Human beings often suffer because they ask life to become still. We want people to stay exactly as they were. We want moments to remain untouched. We want love without change, connection without uncertainty, and happiness without endings. But anything we try to hold forever eventually becomes a source of fear. The freedom discovered through loss is not the freedom of having nothing. It is the freedom of no longer believing that your wholeness depends on something outside of you. The person you lost may have changed your life. Their presence may have given you memories you will always carry. But the deeper truth is that the love, growth, and understanding they awakened within you were never owned by them. They revealed something that was already waiting inside you. Perhaps this is why some losses, despite their pain, become turning points. They remove the things we thought we could not live without and quietly reveal the strength that was hidden beneath our attachment. In the end, everything changes. People arrive, people leave. Seasons pass, chapters close. But the awareness that watches all of this unfold remains. And maybe true wisdom is not learning how to prevent life from changing, but learning how to stand peacefully within its changes. Because when everything you once held on to begins to move away, what remains is the part of you that was never meant to be lost.